How's everybody doing? JP and I are going in and filming ahead of time because we'll be at the North Carolina Meter School next week. And then I'll actually be in Oklahoma the week after that because going over there to train OG&E just bought a bunch of 3 Series from us. So we're going to go over there and do training with them. Actually use one of the benches to go train over there with those guys because we got a fairly big group. So I won't be around for the next 2 weeks. So we're going to film these both ahead of time. So we're going to go ahead and this will be number 17, part 2 of the swamp. I went in and put my proper swamp hat on, by the way. Upcoming schedule is today is part 2. Next week will be part 3. Both of these we're going to do ahead of time, and so that we'll have them in the can, so to speak. We can do demos for you. We can do training sessions with you. We talk about this all the time. Small groups, big groups, individuals, does not matter. JP can connect up with whatever service that you've got to try and communicate back and forth, and we can do it live. And then also, if you want to get any kind of demos besides just straight up training, we can do that for you as well. We talk about all the time of expanding the screen out. Bottom right, the arrows covers up the chat room, so you just have a bigger screen there to see, or you can hit HD down there just to the left of that, and that'll keep you from having any video or audio lagging. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to do a quick recap of how we got to today, the part 1 session, and then we're going to do this part 2. We're going to talk about the connections, of course, because that's one of the key things on all this is making our correct connections there at the site. And this one's a little interesting, so we got some good connection stuff to train you on. And then we've got the actual test setup, because sometimes when you're dealing with these 5S's and these deltas that you have to, sometimes you have to give it a different service type on there to get it to work correctly. And so we did on this one, so it gives you a good example of that. And then we're going to go ahead and get the meter tested. Then in part 3, we'll get into the CTs. So before we get rolling, let's go ahead and I'm going to say a quick prayer, and then we'll get started. Precious Heavenly Father, thank you so much for just another chance to exchange knowledge with people. We have people that give us knowledge back, not only their comments and their feedback, which of course we cherish, but it's just that we also exchange ideas and techniques, and so we just appreciate the back and forth in our industry, the brotherhood, so to speak, that you have in this industry. I think it's interesting, I heard once, there are no atheists in foxholes, so you have a lot of people that are in this industry who put themselves in harm's way in a sacrificial type lifestyle because they're doing it to serve others. So, Father, we know you watch over those folks, and because that's the same mantra that we hold as Christians, right, is a service type attitude, a sacrificial attitude. Your son was the perfect example of that. So, Father, we just today we're just looking forward to learning some more, to exchanging knowledge with some of our Powermetrix nation out there. But more importantly, it's just getting people home safe to their families. That's the most important thing, Father. So anything we can do today to help with that, please see that that happens. Thank you so much for this technology so that we can communicate like this with folks. And most importantly, thank you for your son. Without Jesus, I couldn't even pray right now. So all of these things I ask and say according to the will of the one who paid it all, my brother, Jesus Christ. Amen. All right. So this is going to be the second part of it. Let's do a quick recap. We assessed the site. This is where they'd had a lot of, they'd been underwater for days just prior to this. It had been totally underwater. The road was underwater. I mean, I had driven it doing an inspection, and there were fish swimming in the road. I mean, so it was definitely underwater, and you can see that. So the poles were leaning. They straightened them up. As a matter of fact, I think they straightened up once and came back over, and they had to straighten them twice. So they got the poles lined out, and then we came in here afterwards. And when JP finally stopped playing with the alligator so we could get moving forward, we finally started getting the test done. So, but it was an interesting site. It's a 5S, 4-wire delta. They're not using, there's no B phase current. So we have 3 voltages and 2 currents, okay? We have A, B, and C voltages, but just A and C currents. And so what it's doing is it is summing the A and B's, and I'll stop and talk about that as we're looking at some of these screens on here. So in a setup like this, you have to figure out a way to capture, since they're running 2 conductors through 1 CT, they're only using 2 instead of 3, so they're running them opposite directions. through the one CT. So I have A and B phases are running opposite directions through one CT. The other CT is the high C leg over there. So see that when we're doing the test, he's done some great stick work, Jonathan has, to be able to get that probe up there for us to be able to get up there and take a look at things. So now we're ready to move forward and go ahead and get the test completed. So let's go ahead and hit it, man. Okay, so let's look at the connections we've made right here in the can, and then Jonathan's going to go over how he sets it up in the machine. And we're going to separate these tests. So first we're going to do the meter test, and then you're going to see here in a minute to deal with what we have going on up at the top of the pole. Jonathan's going to have to change the service type up to make it work, but we'll get into that in a minute. First, let's talk about the meter. So as always, we're making our connections down here at the bottom. We mentioned, since we have those holes in the tabs, and we mentioned before, this is real secure because it's got the teeth, and all of ours have got good teeth on the end on these. So it's secured right there. I'm pulling on it, nothing's happening. So he's hooked into those tabs, those holes in the tabs right there. So remember, we've got 3 voltages, so he's red, yellow, blue on the voltages, right? But on the currents, remember on this one, we didn't have anything connected. You can see there's nothing connected here or here, right? So I've got nothing connected there. So now he's only got red and blue. So he's on A and C on his currents, but on B we don't have anything connected on the currents. So that's why my yellow duckbill is not connected. All right. So he's got red, yellow, blue on the voltages. He's got just red and blue on the currents, and we've got our pickup up there. Jonathan opened up the voltage. This is a Landis gear. So on Landis gear, you have to open up one of your voltages to start emitting pulses out here out of that hog nose or COM port. All right. The Landis gear, after a time, it'll emit pulses once it's energized, but then after that it stops. So you have to re-energize it so that you can get the pulses emitted. Okay? So we're connected up correctly here, and now we're going to go over here, and Jonathan's going to show you what we're doing over here at the screen. So we're going to go into just a meter test first. So it's not an integrated site test. It's going to be just a straight meter test.
This is the beginning of the just solely meter test screen. You can see my service type right here is a 3-phase 4-wire delta. C high. We got 2 voltage, 2 currents, and 3 PC. And okay. That is.
All right, so you can see, we talk about this all the time. I'm going to come over here to the board, and again, excuse my writing. But, and we talk about this all the time, which is the service types, right? And, selecting the correct service type is imperative for you to be able to run these tests correctly. So you can see it showed there, it had 2 voltages, 2 currents, and then it had what? 2 primary currents, right? Or you can get 3 primary currents. Now these where you're showing the primary currents, you can think of that as where they have actually CT'd it, okay? How many primary currents they were actually using. You can see right here in this one, he's got 2 voltages, 2 currents, and 3 primary currents right there, okay? So you'll hear him talk about this in a minute, but if you don't choose this correctly right here, you can get yourself in trouble, especially when you start getting into these 5s and 6s and some of the squirrelier stuff. You got to make sure you're choosing the right number of voltages and currents. And we gathered that information when we were looking at the test switch, right? So we were looking at it and we're saying, we see how many voltages we've got, how many currents we've got. So we looked on here and we saw we had 3 voltages and 2 currents, too, right? We have 3 primaries up there, and then we got 2 currents, right? No, you're looking going, wait a minute, that says primary currents. Right, if I look up there, I have 3 voltages and 2 currents. So you're going to listen to the explanation here in a minute. We're going to talk about it some more. Okay, I wanted you to notice that on that service type. All right, thanks.
Potential currents, correct?
Yes, sir.
Now, or
primary currents. Primary currents.
We do have 3 primary currents up top, but we are using 2 CTs.
That's right.
So it does knock it down to 2 currents. There is another setup for 4-wire delta under a 5S meter, and it is 2, 2, and 2. That is not the one you want for this one. It'll give you, I believe, it's about 120% meter registration, just because the calculations are different on it. Deltas are tricky because just the slightest bit off can throw the calculation.
That's right, and that's a good point there, because remember, we've got 3 voltages and 2 currents, so not 2 voltages and 2 currents. But we've only got 2 CTs up there because remember we talked about the crisscrossing, so we're running 2 through the 1. Good point.
We'll toggle over here to the vectors and look at those before we get started.
Sure.
So we can take a look at it.
So this is the meter view, right, Jonathan?
It is. What the meter view shows is actually what the meter's reading off of.
Right.
You see we've just got A phase and C phase.
Right.
But if you look close, you can see you've got SB, AB. So you've got your secondary voltage A and B. You remember the 5S meter is doing an average. It'll do a AB average and a CB average.
Right.
To do its calculations. Now the thing I like to look at the most is right there on F2, you can toggle to connect view. And that's going to show you what you're actually hooked up on. So you see now we've gained that B voltage. It split the voltages up, but you still got your average current.
Okay.
Nice.
So you can see the difference in those two screens. Okay, one is meter view and one is connect view. Meter view is for certain types of meters, which is this is one of those. It's summing this up, right? So the meter is doing some work behind the scenes that you're not seeing. But this is the actual connect view. So this is showing that secondary voltage B, where we have that yellow alligator clip, right? Because we do have it connected. We just don't have any secondary currents on B phase, but we do have a secondary voltage on B phase. So for our connections, you can hit that connect view tab down there, and it doesn't show. Now you don't see it where it's summing it up, and I've only got red and blue here. It's actually showing right here. That's my secondary B voltage that I'm connecting there. So I literally have that yellow alligator clip connected, right, for my voltage there, my blue alligator clip for that, my red alligator clip for that, and then I still just have two, right? I still only have two of my duckbills. So all of this really lines out with what I've actually, what I've actually connected at the test switch. Okay, so this is showing me my actual connect view. The previous one was showing what the meter's seeing when it's doing all its summations and calculations. Okay.
So from back right here, looking at the can, right, remember, we're on here. So actually connect view is showing we do have the B phase voltage is connected. But what the meter's seeing, it's doing a summation, so you don't see it. That's why it's showing that it shows AB. But in this case, it actually shows you a secondary voltage for B right here. Because it's the difference between how it is actually connected versus what the meter sees on it. And then also something is, we have the length, right, the amplitude of what's going on here. Right. So we're seeing so much more on C phase, right? Because remember, we've got a high C leg here. So we're seeing, and we've got that 480 on C leg. So you remember that when we talked about what was up at the top of the pole, remember we always talk about the amplitude or length of the vectors is also important, as well as the separation between them, the relation between them as far as the phase angle there. So here you can see how much longer that C phase voltage is. Okay, cool. So just a question here. If you hit them to take a look at them, what are we actually seeing as far as the voltages, the actual voltages on A and B phase? If you take a look at the quantities there, what are you seeing?
Seeing give or take 60 volts on A and B, and then C is around 100. But remember, we're PT'd up top.
Right.
So we've got 4-to-1 PTs on it. This is a 240/480 setup.
That's right. So if you heard what he said, so we've got PTs up there. So we have 4-to-1 PTs up there, which means it takes it down by a fourth. So if I have 480 on the primary, right, it's only 120 on the secondary. That's why on the screen, that display screen, it showed 120 delta, right? It didn't show 480 or anything because we've PT'd it down. So we have 480 up there, but when we PT it down 4-to-1, it brings it down to 1/4, which is, it's 120, all right? But now also you noticed on A and B we got 60 volts and 60 volts, but it's adding them up to get 120 volts. So you can see it here on this screen, right? It shows it right there. You can also hit that RMS table, right? If you hit that, and it also shows it there on this connect view, because here, and it's a smart thing, when Jonathan did the connect view, you can see it. If you did the meter view, it wouldn't show this, would it? It wouldn't show the 60,
it would
60.
show the average. We can actually toggle back to meter view, and it's going to do your average. So you're showing 120 volts.
See, so, right. So that's just another tool Jonathan uses between looking at a connect view and meter view. On the meter view here, it's going to show you 120, but if he toggles back over to the connect view, it's going to show them individually, and it's going to show 60 and 60.
So I'm sure y'all caught that. So the deal was seeing the 60 and 60 on A and B. That's because if I'm using those 4-to-1 PTs, right, and I've got 240 volt, and I got 240 volt and I got 4-to-1s, if I divide that by 4, golly, that was bad. That wasn't good. Let's try it again. Hey, Okay, what do we get? 60, right? So that's where we're getting it from. So we had 240 on each of those legs. We've PT'd it down, so we got 60 on each of the two legs. Then we add those back together, we get what? Around 120. So that's where we're getting the 120 on the one side, the 120 over with the one PT. Then we got 120 over on the other one because we've got 4 to 1 at 480. So that brings it down to 120. So we got 120 and 120. Okay? All right.
Cool. All right, so at this point, you feel like you're ready to run it?
Everything looks good to me.
Okay, cool. So let's run the test.
Fire the meter test.
So here, like always, we're waiting for the large green circle here to light up. It'll give us an audible beep, and then down here in the right-hand corner, it's going to say Start Test. You can't start it until you get that. So now, did you go 0 and 3, or did you go 30 and 3?
I lifted at 0 and 3.
Okay, so the difference there on a customer load test is you have two places that tell you the duration of the test. You've got time and you've got number of revs or pulses. So what he's done is if either one of them is left 0, whichever value is left in there, it will complete that number. So he's left 0 on the time and 3 revs, so that means it will go through 3 revs or pulses before it completes the test. If he had put in 30 seconds or 3 revs, then that means whichever comes first, the 30 seconds or the 3 revs, it will complete the test, all right? I even have some people that will leave it and they'll go just by time. So they'll put 120 in there and 0 revs or pulses. Well, then it's going to go 120 seconds before it completes the test. Or in this case, we left 0 and 3 revs, so it'll go through 3 revs or pulses before it completes the test. So how'd she come out? We could hear it beeping in the background, and every time it beeps, that means that was a pulse or rev. So it looks like we got 100.098. We can live that. We'll live with that all day long. That means that the utility's coming out just a tiny bit ahead. Remember, the two numbers are, if it's below 100, then that means the utility's losing a tiny bit. We always want to make it tiny, right? So you could lose a tiny bit. If you had 99.9 something, you're losing just a tiny bit. If it's over 100, then that means the utility's getting just a tiny bit extra. Okay, in this case, a very tiny bit. So that one you can live with, right, Jonathan?
I think it'll be all right.
Cool. Okay, so we got it good on that test. So now we're going to reconfigure and get ready, and we're going to go ahead and get up there and test the CTs.
And one thing that I didn't mention, I apologize, is the information that we had entered on that screen for that customer load test, we gleaned off the face of that meter, like when you saw the KCP 1.2, we got that right off the face of the meter. So not only do you look and see the delta on the display screen to see it's a delta, see what voltage you're dealing with down there at the bottom of the pole. You can also look over on the left side on the face of the meter, the left side of the display usually, and it'll tell you which form the meter is. But also down there you've got other information down there. You've got what class of meter it is, like if it's a CL20, then you'll know that it's a class 20 meter, so it handles 20 amps. You'll see class 200s, which handle 200 amps, so that tells you what that meter is made to handle. It tells you what voltages it's also made to handle, and now most of them are auto ranging 120 to 480 voltages. But we also get that 1.2 that we entered in there to enter the site in to be able to test that site, right? So we entered in the 1.2 for our K sub T. So you gain all that stuff off the face of the meter before you get rolling. So that's all that inspection that we talk about beforehand. And I think everybody, and the next one you're going to see some really good stick work because Jonathan's got to get up there and try and grab some of that stuff with that high volt probe and get more than one conductor in there. So the stick work is going to be in part 3, so we're going to show some really good stick work. But we did the meter test. You saw, I thought it was pretty cool showing the difference between connect view and the meter view. So you can actually look at how you're connecting yourself up there. But then remember, sometimes on the guts and inside of that meter, it's doing some calculations. It's summing some things and doing stuff so that you look, and I'm going to go over here real quick. One thing that's a dead giveaway is when you see things like this, right? That wasn't that bad. So, not bad, huh? VAB, when you see more than one letter off over here, what it's doing is, when you see more than one letter, what that's doing is, it's referencing another phase. It's just not going to neutral, right? So doing here is you're using B as a reference. You might have VAB and VCB. But if you have more than one letter down there, then that's what it's doing. It's referencing off of that. But you noticed when we took it from meter view, which does things like this, to connect view, where you actually connect it, it separated out those voltages for us, and it showed where we were connected over there on B phase on our voltage. So we had 3 voltages and 2 currents here. And so by putting in a connect view, you can take a real quick look and see, should I have my B phase connected or not? Okay, in this case we were. Okay, so we've gotten through the inspection part of it now. We've gotten through the meter test. So now we're ready to go part 3, which is where we're going to test the CTs and get a test, see some of that good stick work of Jonathan's up the top of the pole. So stay tuned, and as soon as JP gets all this taken care of, what he has to do on post, what do you call that?
Post-production.
Post-production. His post-production work, then we will go ahead and do part 3 since we're going to be out of town. So thanks a lot, and here in a few minutes, he and I will go ahead and knock out part 3 for y'all.